Hello everyone, I'm Akshat Verma and currently I'm doing my bachelor's and I am an interested and an aspiring cyber enthusiast and I'm here to introduce our presenter, Chloé Messdaghi, who is a very big game changer in the cyber security world. She is a very seasoned speaker who has an experience from speaking in various international conferences and in many Fortune 500 companies. She is a very big trusted source and she has an enormous amount of valuable research, op-eds, and comments published in numerous outlets. She has been awarded as the Cybersecurity Advocate of the Year by WSC2. Currently outside of work, she is working as a co-founder of the Be Open Tech, which fights for equity and rights of technological advances. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Chloe Messdaghi.
Hi there. I'm so excited for this talk and I'm excited to be here today with you. Welcome to InfoSec, a broken industry that keeps it insecure and risky. And I'm very excited to talk about this because it's something close to my heart about burnout, but also I get to touch about how our industry could really use some help right now on making things better for everyone on how to reduce burnout. And I just want to say that this talk is just really putting out there that burnout is not caused by you. It's not about self-care anymore. It is about how we are in this certain system that we are placed in and how it keeps causing us to get burned out, which I'm going to touch on today. So first things first, my name is Chloé Messdaghi, and that is my handles. Feel free to follow. I am on Twitter and on Instagram and on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out at any of those places. I am also the co-founder of We Open Tech and Hacking is Not a Crime, also the co-owner of Open Tech Pledge, and I'm a growth strategy consultant and career consultant as well in information security, but also for tech-wide related. I also provide an advice column for Security Boulevard every week called Ask Chloe, and I am the host of the Change Making podcast on ITSP magazine. If there's anything else you want to know about me, feel free to check me out at standoutintech.com. Now let's get into the real reason why you're here today. I just want to say that you may be here right now. Let's be honest with one another. The pandemic, there was no guide on how to survive it, and we're still in a pandemic. And we are on a fine line of just being okay and not being okay. And we've been dealing with burnout even before the pandemic within our industry. So that's why it's important for us to talk about this, because even when the pandemic is over, we still have to address this. With burnout, we do place ourselves and organization at a security risk. We're more likely to click on a link because we're not 100% who we are, because we are not a full, completely charged battery in a sense. So we're going to make a lot more mistakes. We may not even patch correctly. We may be overwhelmed of what is needed to be patched. But also, let's be real. Sometimes us being in security, people see us as kind of like robots and not humans. And this is one of the things is that within security itself, we're expected to work 24/7 and always be at the edge of our seat 24/7, because that is what's expected of us, is to work all hours and be expected to be on calls at all hours, because security is 24/7. So at the end of the day is, how do you even balance a personal life and work life? Because the reality is that if we're not balancing our work and personal life, that's when we start having burnout, because that balance is gone. So you may even see signs of it, such as like you've noticed changes with your colleagues, even with yourself. They may be withdrawn or fast to become angry and sad. You might see delay in responses or projects, and this could be seen remote too. You don't have to actually be in person to know if someone's burned out or not. But this is the thing is to understand is that since we've been remote, And also, since we've been working from home in the pandemic, the thing is that it's incredibly hard to put a line in the sand saying, this is my work time, this is my personal time, and putting boundaries down, because it's almost impossible in the past to have boundaries when you work in security. But the thing is that I think at this point, we are starting to realize if we don't put down boundaries, or we're not practicing more balancing of work and personal life, we end up getting burned out, and the effects can be really bad. And for those that aren't aware of how bad burnout can start forming and looking like, it used to be that it took a few minutes to respond to an email. Now it takes hours or days. You may feel exhausted and trapped. You might even feel empty. You may push yourself to like this breaking point, and it's almost impossible to come up with new ideas or new strategies. And then you start getting some aches here and there as well. You get overly anxious over events and deadlines. You can get angry or you can get sad very fast. And the other thing is that you may even not respond to your friends and family at a certain time, not because you're busy, it's because you're worried that that's going to be another task on top of everything. And that's when you start having this guilt that comes in. And when that guilt starts coming in, it's a reminding you that your personal life is now slipping. Your work has become your life. And then when your life is your work, you start feeling underappreciated for everything that you have given up to be in that role or where you work. And then you get resentful at your work. Now, when you get resentful, this ends up being this change of hating and dreading going to your job. This is the moment that you do lose team members. So burnout is something very, very serious. And it's not just that, but also when we don't address burnout, this can happen to your body. You're going to feel exhausted. You're going to struggle to sleep. You'll start mimicking the same symptoms as anxiety and depression. You'll start noticing that you get sick more often. Your muscles get tight and sore. You might get more headaches suddenly or gastrointestinal issues as well. And cardiovascular problems increase. So this gives you a higher chance of the stress that's been prolonged for too long. So you have high blood pressure and heart attacks and strokes. Because there's too much adrenaline cortisol in your body over an extended time. So burnout is not a joke. It is something serious. And no matter how much you push it and you don't want to address it, the thing is, it will hit you. And when it does, it will hit you hard. So the thing is why are we burnt out within our industry? Like I said before, we operate 24/7 around the clock. And even in the middle of the night, that means if I get a phone call at 2 or 3 in the morning, that means I need to take that phone call because it's important, because I don't want to put anyone at risk, and neither do you. So that's the thing, is like we're always around the clock. It's very hard to ever have a moment of just relaxing, or whether or not when is the call going to happen, that there's a breach. Because the thing is, attackers, they go at all hours, and we're always knowing that a breach is going to occur. It will occur eventually. We just don't know when. And this is the thing. We're also really scared when there is a breach, because we know that it's most likely going to be an ad hoc style to fix it. Because the reality is, according to the Poneman Institute, while security response planning is slowly improving year after year, is that the vast majority of organizations, 74% of them, reported not having any incident response plan or having an ad hoc plan when it comes to having a breach. This also means that those that did have plans in the first place, they didn't have any time of when they're going to review or when they were going to test them out or revisit them at a date. And this is really scary for us because, well, we don't have up-to-date plans. How are we? It's the just amount of stress and weight on our shoulders of how are we going to deal with this when this crisis happens? So this is why it's important. If we put more attention towards preparing and prevention, we have a better chance of feeling like we're a little bit less stressed But this also allows us to know that if we are burned out and we have a call saying that there is a breach, we have a procedure that's intact that we can actually utilize. Now, the other thing is that 94% of the Forbes 2000 list still don't have vulnerability disclosure policies. So this is another hard thing for having security plans, is that if you don't have a security strategy that doesn't incorporate having a bug bounty program and or a vulnerability disclosure policies, it is a horrible situation, because the thing is, there's too much reliance on a security team, and we need diverse eyes to find bugs so then we're able to fix it. But it also is one of those things that we have to come to this point in our industry, is that we need to build a bridge between the hacker community and the companies, because the reality is, if we don't build that bridge, we're going to keep having these situations. And we could have avoided many breaches if we had those programs set up. And of course, what we tend to do in our industry is that we forget about that there's a human element at play. So what we do is we throw tools, hoping that that's going to fix the situation. And what I mean by that is that right now, organizations use more than 45 different security tools. And you don't even know how much you can trust that. But also, usually our incident response plan coordination has approximately 19 tools as well. Now, are those tools updated? How secure are those tools? Were there more tools added to them? Because remember, most of the plans that we have already don't exist, or they're out of date. The other thing is that more tools, part of the process means that there's going to be a slower remediation time, and it's going to cost more money. And let me paint a picture of how stressful this situation is for a security team now. I want you to imagine that you're on a crew, and you're on this cruise ship, and you just found out that your ship is sinking, but you found out a little bit late because you weren't alerted by your system on time. Your customers are aboard, and they're trusting you for their safety. Now, the one thing to remember is that your team is a bit scared. This is a brand new situation. Even though they've practiced multiple times on what to do in this situation, the thing is that they're scared because they're suddenly in the heat of the moment. But the thing to also keep in mind is that there is this fear of failing that can paralyze people too when they're in when they're dealing with a crisis. So the thing to keep in mind here is that your team, your crew is trying their best to keep everything afloat and to make sure that everyone is going to be okay with the ship going down. Now, there is a catch here. Your team hasn't really slept well. They also feel a little seasick. So you could kind of say that they're kind of processing and operating as if they have burnout. In other words, they're not exactly 100% state of mind. And this is something to keep in mind. Now you have the backstory. Now, I want you to imagine your captain pulls out the safety binder to know what is the protocol for this ship. But unfortunately, that binder that was updated is not on that ship at all. So you're using an old procedure, but have new features to the ship, and your team is burned out in a sense because they're seasick and they're paralyzed by the fear of failing. Are you stressed out now? Because this is what it's like when we deal with bad plans and when the human element is taken out. It leaves you with a wreckage, literally. The truth is that bad actors are everywhere and they attack all hours, and 0 days drop often, and we constantly need to be up to date of what bad actors use. This takes time and energy, and this is why we're struggling, because we're part of a crew, but we don't function well or communicate well. It could become a really scary situation. And the reason is that we are in security because we know it's incredibly important to protect one another. And the other thing is to keep in mind is that we've also come to terms that we work around the clock and we don't even have time to practice self-care because of the demand and the stress of what we're doing. So you have to understand where we come to a place in our career, and we might be like, what is the point of this? if our employer isn't helping us or our industry isn't changing, how are we going to change things in a sense? And this is why burnout matters, is that if we keep turning to tools and we don't find the time to digest the human element of this that is in play, we're never going to be able to get where we want to go with our security team. And that is the reason why we also need to rely on the hacker community, because the reality is the hacker community is going to find the bugs your security team cannot find. And this is important to note because it's better to have the hacker community find those vulnerabilities than an attacker to get a hold of that vulnerability and not report it to you and take advantage of you. You don't want to breach, right? None of us want to breach. That's why we're in this in the first place. And that's why we have to understand something, which is we cannot overly rely on our security teams to find all the bugs, because the reality is that your team is most likely burned out at some point, or at least one person is going to be burned out on your team at all times. And so this is the thing is that we need to understand that having vulnerability disclosure policies and bug bounty programs are incredibly important to our strategy when it comes to security. But also, it allows us to partner with individuals that are trying to help us, in other words. Now, the thing I want to just say is that when you do have a bug bounty and vulnerability disclosure policies in place, it's so incredibly important that you have someone who can manage inquiries and delegate bugs and also can be on top of communicating. And this is why having a bug bounty program such as HackerOne, it's incredibly important to have that. It makes it easier for communicating, for finding and fixing those bugs faster than ever, which does keep you protected from attackers. Now, for the bug bounty hunters that are listening to this, first of all, thank you for doing what you do, because we need you. At the end of the day, we need you. Even if organizations don't have vulnerability disclosure policies or a bug bounty program, they will one day, because they will realize they need you too. We can't always rely on our own team. We have to get outside help. Now, the thing I can tell from your perspective is that the reality is that we can put in so many hours to find bugs, and there comes to a point where we don't find things for weeks and months, and this can be alarming and this can be scary. And the reality is that sometimes we just need to take a break. Taking a break from everything from InfoSec and then coming back a week later, you'll feel a lot more refreshed. But the thing is that bug bounty hunters, it's a lot of hours and dedication if you're doing this full-time, and especially if you're doing this part-time and having a full-time security job, it's a lot of work. So trying to find time to balance that personal life is also really hard. But the other thing is stressful is like waiting for the communication. Like it could be terrible. I'll be honest. There's delays and expectations, a conflict all the time when trying to get paid out or getting an update on the bug that you submitted. And this can be also very stressful. And when we have so much stress that isn't being dealt with, this ends up turning into burnout. So it's really important that when we report to an organization is for us to both understand that we're all part of a situation and we all have wants and desires, and it's also really stressful to be in this industry. And I want to talk about that a little bit further into this conversation. But first, I just want to say is that overall, I hope from the beginning of this conversation is that everyone's pretty much burned out at some point or at this very moment. And that is the reality of everything, is that with COVID-19, we're taking care of family members. We're on camera daily. We're unable to leave our homes sometimes. We can't see our friends and family. And some of us live alone. Some of us put off some really important life events. And some of us have lost people because of the pandemic. And our colleagues are struggling. We're struggling. Some of us are worried of keeping a job. Some of us are doing bug bounty for a living because we are trying every way possible to get funds in our pocket. it's a very weird time. And the thing is, it's okay to be honest and say that, let's be honest with one another, is that we can't keep doing everything all the time. And that's okay. But the thing is that we have to figure this out as an industry of how to do something better, because the human element created security and runs on security. And we're all struggling right now to a certain extent. So let's change this problem and dive into 5 investments that we can do. So first things first, listen and take action together. Be strong, be kind, ask your team, what do they need? Don't just listen and then, not take action. The thing is, we have to take actions. So listen to one another and try to get a good idea of what you can do to help out the situation. And because that is the reality of what's going on, is that even on security teams, we're not being able to communicate what is needed. It might be like, hey, we don't need this tool anymore. There's this other tool that does 3 things in one. It could also be about trying to get helping your CISO out to go to the board to push for vulnerability disclosure policies, or to get funds to even invest in the security team. And that's the reality, is asking people around you, how can you help? Because the reality is that we kind of have to work together to kind of get out of this mess. And like I said, listening to one another and taking action is definitely important, but also planning together. So if you're on a security team, it's really important is to create strategies and revisit your security response plan, making sure that it's up to date. And also just keep on remembering that, if a tool is added or removed, that should be updated in your incident response plan. If there's a team member change, that should be updating your incident response plan. If there's an environment change, such as everyone's working from home now, that needs to be updating your incident response plan. It's so important that we have solid plans, because this does reduce the stress of when a breach occurs, that we have a game plan in a sense. You owe it to yourselves, you owe it to your team, your colleagues, your organization, even your customers. Now, the one thing I want to also say is that you also do have to practice certain self-care, which is, if you're starting to feel burned out, it's time to take time off. That means take time off. That means not being on social media. That means getting off of your computer, your devices. That means taking a whole week off, because studies have shown if you want to deal with burnout and get rid of burnout, take a whole week off and don't do anything work related. It's really important. That's the only way that you can recover, believe it or not, is to do that and to make changes in your workplace or your home life. So just keep that in mind. And I know that it's very scary to take time off, because sometimes we're afraid if we take time off that our teammates are going to have to pick up our work, or we're going to be afraid that we're going to be coming back to a dumpster fire. So it's really important to understand is we need to take time off regardless, because even if you are not taking time off and you're burned out, chances are you're going to impact someone else or some other team or some other organization, because you're not able to properly do what you can do if you weren't burned out. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that this also means reducing your meetings. If you have meetings, have one day off a week from meetings, so then we can play catch up in a sense. Now, the other thing I would say is investment number 4 is have a vulnerability disclosure policies and or a bug bounty program. I mean it. If you care about your security at your organization, have one, but also not just have one, but also make sure that it is managed well. And what I mean by that is having effective communications between the hackers that are submitting the bugs and your organization's response. It is so important that we have better communication across the parties, because that's one of the reasons why it can be very stressful to participate. So it's really important is to just make sure that it's managed well, have it really structured well, and really try your best and get feedback from the hackers. So say like, how can we do better next time? Ask them. They love to respond and tell you about that. And also, hackers, feel free to reach out to them and ask them, how can I do better next time? How can I improve my communication? Or how can I do better? And I think that's the one thing that we can always do is just ask, how can I do better? Now, I want to just take this moment here to just talk really quick on this one. Investment number 5 is be kind and respect boundaries. We have to just understand delays and expectations are in conflict all the time in bug bounty world, and also when we're reporting vulnerabilities. But it's really, really important is to understand to be kind to one another, because we don't know what the other person's going through. And it's really important that we need to start practicing empathy a little bit more, is to try to understand what their situation is like so we can understand one another. Because by having empathy, this also helps reduce our stress, but also this allows us to, in the end, kind of reduce that burnout here and there, or reduce the possibility of getting burned out. And what I mean by is like, you send your way back. Please don't. What I'm bad is contact them on their social media. That means don't DM them on their Twitter or LinkedIn or their Facebook or Instagram. What I mean by that is understand that it is their job and they don't work 24/7 around the clock. They have boundaries. They work between 9 to 5 in a certain time zone, and that the weekends they don't want to work. And it's really understanding to understand this whole situation is please respect boundaries. It is their job, but they also have a personal life outside of work, and respect that. So when you do have communication with them, what you can do is ask, when should I follow up? And I like this question quite a bit, because when they ask me that question, when should I follow up? I can give them an idea of like, reach out in 2 weeks or reach out within 7 days. And this really helps the conversation, because then you just mark it in your calendar and then you write back to them on that day if you haven't heard back or an update. Other thing is that if you are basically following up with a hacker that has submitted a vulnerability, it's important to understand that for some, bug bounty and hunting is their income. So please understand, if they're like, hey, I haven't been paid out yet, understand that to them, getting paid is really important, because for some, it is their main income. And also, it doesn't matter. The thing is, if they've paid and you've accepted this bug, they need to get paid out. The other thing to keep in mind is that language and culture does play a role. We're all around the world. We're all different. So it's important to be kind in your responses, but also be as transparent as possible, but also to provide a time frame for them. This also helps with you when they try to come back and to follow up with some updates. So here's a quick slide of what you can do right now to reduce burnout. Is have set one-on-ones for 15 minutes with each employee if you're on a team. Make Monday or Fridays a no meeting day. Set up a meeting with your team to explore ways on how you can improve together. You can always create an anonymous survey to find out what is going on and how the company can do better. But please note, not everyone's going to participate, and don't enforce it. But also have vulnerability disclosure policies and someone who can manage the incoming at the same time. And last, remember, when we work together and listen to each other, magic does happen. And when we work together, making sure people get personal time off without the fear and take time away, we then become collaborative. But also acknowledging that when we collaborate, we also reduce the stressful items that hold us back from our team from thriving. And focusing on that balancing of work and personal life is something very important for everyone. And we need to support that. And also, we need to work with the hacker community. Bug bounty programs, vulnerability disclosure policies are incredibly important for reducing the stress on your teammates, because sometimes we need a little bit of help outside our security team. So overview, burnout does place you and your team at a huge risk. Collaborate to form strategies to improve the team. Start making plans and revisit security response plans, and promote self-care by being kind and respectful to boundaries, and also take some breaks. That's the only way you're going to heal from burnout. I just want to say thank you all so much for existing. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be here. If you have any questions at all, feel free to ask. But until then, keep on hunting, and please stay safe. Bye-bye.